Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we get you up to speed on complex topics quickly and thoroughly. You're here because you want to understand the ins and outs of unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAP, and their implications for national security.
And you've certainly given us a rich set of materials to explore. We're looking at news from history and military times, Wikipedia entries on Christopher Mellon and Lue Elizondo, and some very active discussions from Reddit communities focused on UFOs and aliens.
Right. Our goal in this deep dive is to extract the core insights and, the different viewpoints surrounding UAPs. We want to understand what they might be, the level of concern they warrant, and what former government officials, researchers, and the public are saying. Okay, let's unpack this. And a really compelling place to begin is the 2004 USS Nimitz incident, which Christopher Mellon, he's a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence. He's discussed it quite a bit.
What's fascinating about the Nimitz incident is the sheer credibility of the reports. As Mellon details, you had multiple naval aviators observing these wingless aircraft with seemingly impossible maneuverability. And this was over an extended period, in broad daylight, not just some fleeting, ambiguous sighting.
And it wasn't just pilots seeing things, right? Mellon really stresses that these visual confirmations were backed up by sophisticated air defense sensor systems on multiple platforms.
Yeah, multiple platforms. We're talking radar, maybe infrared data, all painting a similar picture managed by separate teams.
Exactly. The fact that these independent systems and operators corroborated the same events, well, it strengthens the case that something physically real was there. Mellon's perspective is quite clear. A rational assessment of this evidence points to a genuine phenomenon that demands serious attention.
Yeah, absolutely.
But this leads to a really puzzling aspect of the incident. According to Mellon, the pilots who saw these things, they were met with ridicule when they got back. He describes a surprising lack of official curiosity from the intelligence personnel on board, like no real effort to even document what happened properly, let alone investigate. It's kind of the opposite of what you'd expect from a highly trained military unit encountering something unknown in its airspace.
This apparent indifference.
Yeah.
Even with high-quality sensor data, it suggests maybe a cognitive bias in intelligence circles. Prioritizing known threats over anomalies, even when those anomalies show really advanced capabilities. As Mellon points out, we spend billions on intelligence to prevent strategic surprises. Yet here was a potential strategic surprise unfolding, and the system seemed to, just falter.
And Mellon offers a possible reason for this lack of response. He suggests that encountering something so radically outside our existing understanding, it makes it hard for people to process. There's no framework for it. So the default response becomes dismissal.
That's a very human reaction, isn't it? Confronted with something completely new, disbelief is often the first step. But Mellon also raises a crucial point about the combat personnel involved. They're the ones face-to-face with these objects. If their reports are ignored or ridiculed, well, that could have serious consequences for their safety, their effectiveness.
He puts it pretty starkly. Mellon says if one of these craft had, a Russian insignia painted on it, the reaction would have been immediate, intense. That really highlights the discrepancy, doesn't it? How we react to a known potential threat versus something completely unknown.
It's a powerful analogy. And Mellon draws a parallel to the Soviet Union launching Sputnik. That event, decades ago, it galvanized the public, spurred a national effort. He hopes that maybe increased awareness of these UAP encounters could generate a similar level of concern, a demand for answers today.
But he's also faced hurdles trying to raise this within the Pentagon itself. Mellon notes that even senior officials often just aren't aware of the basic data. This information isn't flowing through the normal intelligence channels, apparently.
That suggests a potential problem with information flow, maybe because of compartmentalization or maybe even an institutional reluctance to just engage with the topic. If the data isn't reaching the decision makers, well, a meaningful response is incredibly difficult.
So we have this compelling modern case, but the U.S.
The article indicates that the government internally decided it needed to actively discredit the phenomenon. This suggests they knew something potentially significant was happening, enough to cause public anxiety. So the strategy became denial and debunking to keep order. This history of discrediting UFOs, even with unexplained cases, creates this legacy of distrust that complicates things today.
Project Blue Book looked at, 12,000 cases? An impressive number. And even after all that, 700 remained officially unexplained. That's a lot of incidents defying normal explanations.
It is. And connecting this back to Christopher Mellon, the article mentions his inquiries about those rumors of a secret U.S. hypersonic triangle aircraft, the TR-3B type stuff.
Yeah.
He pursued this with high-ranking officials, including Senator Byrd, who was highly respected.
And the response he got was a pretty definitive denial. No such highly advanced secret aircraft existed.
Mellon highlights two key points here. First, a technology that revolutionary. It wouldn't just appear. It needs huge R&D infrastructure. Second, there's just no evidence of any such undertaking. This strengthens the argument that at least some of these unexplained sightings probably aren't secret U.S. projects.
Okay, so given this ongoing phenomenon and the historical lack of clear answers, what are the current efforts to try and figure this out?
Well, according to Mellon, there are kind of three main avenues globally. First, NASA's exobiology program. It's a long-term systematic search for microbial life beyond Earth. Scientifically valuable, sure, but unlikely to give immediate answers about UAPs.
Then there's the privately funded SETI program, the one started by a Russian billionaire listening for extraterrestrial signals. Mellon acknowledges its worth, but points out the big challenge. We don't know what kind of signals to even listen for, or if we'd recognize them.
Right. And the third effort, which Mellon is actively involved in, is pushing the U.S. government to use its massive network of existing sensors to analyze data that might be relevant to UAP.
He makes a really compelling case for this, doesn't he? The U.S. government has this incredible array of sensors, satellites, underwater systems, constantly collecting just vast amounts of data. His argument is that data likely contains info about UAPs if only someone specifically looked for it.
Precisely. He uses the Nimitz incident again as an example. He suggests, let's go back, look at the data collected during that period, see if there are other unusual signatures that might correlate with what the pilot saw and the radar picked up. The sensors were running, the data exists. It just needs to be examined with the UAP question in mind.
And Mellon's initial proposal isn't about creating new, expensive programs, right? It's about persuading Congress and the executive branch to use the resources taxpayers already paid for. Seems like a pretty logical, cost-effective first step.
It does. Now, shifting focus slightly, we've seen more attention on drone incursions recently, alongside this continued push for more UAP transparency. Figures like Lue Elizondo and Christopher Mellon are actively talking with lawmakers.
That's right. The Defense Scoop article details their recent closed-door briefings on Capitol Hill. And it's significant that the Pentagon's new office, AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, is now investigating a broader range of unidentified anomalous phenomena. Not just aerial, but also underwater transmedium.
That expansion of AARO's scope is important. It's recognizing these things aren't just in the air, which is crucial for understanding their potential nature and origin.
Yeah.
Elizondo's team, including Mellon, specifically met with lawmakers to push for more public transparency about these recent incursions.
And Elizondo makes a key distinction between UAP and conventional drones, focusing on attribution right. Ideally, you can trace a drone back to someone, a nation, a company, an individual. UAP, often they just lack any identifiable signatures.
That lack of attribution is exactly what triggers the national security concerns. Elizondo points out the possibility that some UAP could be advanced adversarial tech operating unchallenged in our airspace. He cited the reported disruption at Langley Air Force Base as an example. If a foreign power has capabilities we aren't even properly detecting or tracking, that's a serious vulnerability.
Elizondo also seems to push back on the Trump administration's claim that most drone incursions were FAA approved. He raises some good questions. If they were just regular drones, why hasn't any been recovered? Why haven't operators come forward? And why do they often lack any detectable electromagnetic signature?
These are critical points. If these were just hobbyist or commercial drones, you'd expect some physical evidence, or at least someone taking responsibility. The lack of that in many UAP cases strongly suggests something else is going on. Hence the urgency in Elizondo's call for AARO experts to really dig into these recent incidents.
And Elizondo emphasizes that getting meaningful transparency, it's a process, not a single big disclosure event. It sounds like Congress is kind of on board with that, aiming for a phased approach to give the public more information.
Yeah, a gradual, responsible approach probably makes sense. Releasing information in a way that doesn't, overwhelm people or compromise truly sensitive national security stuff.
Now, the discussion around UAP inevitably brings us to some of the more debated figures and their perspectives. Let's talk about people like Tom DeLonge and Bob Lazar and the often polarizing opinions around them.
Well, the Military Times article highlights the U.S. Army actually collaborating with Tom DeLonge's company, To the Stars Academy, specifically to study alleged alien tech. That shows some level of official engagement, at least through unconventional channels.
But this also brings up some interesting contradictions in the military's past approach. The article quotes someone pointing out, look, if you see something suspicious at an airport, you're told, see something, say something, right? Report it. But within the military, the culture around UAP sightings has often been discouragement. Personnel feared ridicule, maybe career damage.
That cultural barrier is huge. If service members hesitate to report UAP encounters because they're afraid of negative consequences, you lose valuable data. It hinders understanding. The article does mention Elizondo expressed optimism about the Navy apparently shifting towards taking UAP more seriously, which could signal a positive change in that old dynamic.
Now, Lue Elizondo himself, he's faced his own share of controversy, hasn't he? Particularly about his claims regarding ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. The Reddit discussions on this get pretty heated.
Yeah, what's interesting is the debate about the actual nature, even the formal existence of ATIP, as Elizondo described it, versus another program called AWSAP Advanced Aerospace Weapon System Applications Program. Some Reddit users, citing investigative work, suggest ATIP wasn't formally funded like Elizondo presents it.
Right. The idea seems to be that AWO was the program that got the $22 million funding, while ATIP was more like an informal name, maybe used by Senator Reid for budget stuff. Some even allege Elizondo's role in AWA was minimal, described as only in name as a matter of pro forma.
This criticism often centers on what some see as Elizondo being vague when asked for details and relying on classification to avoid specifics. Some Reddit users express frustration, wanting more concrete public evidence to back up his claims about his role and what ATIP actually did.
However, it is important to remember that Defense Scoop did report on Elizondo's closed-door briefings with lawmakers alongside Christopher Mellon. That indicates he's still taken seriously by some within government.
That's a crucial point. Despite the online debates, he is still engaging with people in positions of authority. And Pentagon spokesperson Christopher Sherwood did confirm that ATIP did pursue research and investigation into unidentified aerial phenomena. So they acknowledged the program existed and studied UAP.
Sherwood also stated that Elizondo had no responsibilities with regard to the ATIP program while he worked in OSDI Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence up until the time he resigned. This seems to directly contradict Elizondo's own account of his involvement. Working in OSDI implies a significant level of responsibility.
Exactly. And in response to that apparent contradiction, as noted in his Wikipedia entry, Elizondo filed a formal complaint with the Department of Defense Inspector General. He alleged a coordinated campaign to discredit him, claiming this included Pentagon press statements denying his role, even after it had supposedly been confirmed elsewhere.
So we have a clear disagreement here, and the online communities definitely reflect this split. Some see Elizondo as a brave truth-teller, others are skeptical, even suggesting he might be involved in disinformation. His involvement with History's Unidentified show also adds to his public profile and, the ongoing debate.
This whole situation just underscores the challenges in this field, doesn't it? The lack of definitive, publicly verifiable information creates space where speculation and different interpretations can really take hold.
And then there's Bob Lazar, another figure who sparks tons of discussion and even more intense skepticism. Reddit threads often label him controlled opposition, suggesting he intentionally mixes truth and falsehoods.
Yeah, the inconsistencies in Lazar's stories are often brought up. For instance, the discrepancy about initially denying seeing alien bodies and later mentioning cadavers in an interview, that raises questions about reliability.
There are also those persistent questions about his claimed background, his education, especially the alleged MIP connection. And some people wonder, okay, if he had access to such highly classified stuff, why would the government trust him? Unless it served a purpose, like controlled leaks maybe.
The comparison to other alleged whistleblowers, like Bill Cooper, who had a very different tragic end, is also frequently made. The fact that Lazar has remained relatively free in public for so long leads some to speculate about his actual role.
The whole Project Bluebeam theory, the idea of a big disinformation campaign involving a staged alien invasion, that sometimes comes up in discussions about Lazar too. The idea being his claims, true or not, could be part of some larger effort to manipulate public perception.
Interestingly, Luis Elizondo himself seems to have subtly distanced himself from, or maybe even discredited, Bob Lazar in some interviews. That further fuels the skepticism about Lazar within the UAP community.
So, Between the controversies around Elizondo's role and the widespread skepticism aimed at Lazar, it's clear that the people presenting information about UAPs are themselves subject to a lot of scrutiny and debate.
Absolutely. Figuring out who and what to believe. That's one of the central challenges when looking into this subject.
Okay, finally, let's briefly touch on Tom DeLonge's perspectives, especially from his UFO film, which also got discussed on Reddit. His views often go into more unconventional, even philosophical areas.
Yeah, DeLonge's film explores some pretty broad, almost metaphysical ideas. One concept presented is that UFO entities might have intentionally created belief systems to divide humanity. He also suggests all world religions share a common underlying story of good versus evil.
He also talks about paranormal and UFO hotspots being tracked globally and this idea of a split within government about how much to tell the public about UFOs. The public isn't ready versus the public can handle its debate.
And it gets even more abstract, reportedly touching on concepts like souls and their connection to different dimensions or densities of existence. It even references the law of one material, which is a set of esoteric channeled writings.
There are also speculations about non-human entities maybe lacking souls or being particularly interested in human consciousness. It definitely ventures into very speculative territory.
Unsurprisingly, many Reddit users express, let's say, considerable skepticism about DeLonge's credibility in the film's interpretations. Blending UFOs with these broad philosophical and spiritual concepts, it can be pretty polarizing.
Okay, so as we wrap up, what are the key takeaways from our deep dive into all this complex material?
First, I think compelling evidence, like the Nimitz incident, provides strong indications that UAP with advanced capabilities are, well, real. These aren't just isolated stories. They're backed by multiple credible witnesses and sophisticated sensor data.
Second, history shows a sustained government effort to manage and often downplay public concern about UFOs, even when they had a significant number of unexplained cases. That historical context of secrecy definitely complicates how we see current information.
Third, current efforts seem focused on using existing sensor tech to gather more data, and also on increasing transparency about both UAP and more conventional aerial incursions. Former officials like Mellon and Elizondo are still key voices pushing for more openness.
And finally, the whole UAP landscape is just filled with different perspectives and significant controversies, especially around figures like Elizondo, Lazar, and DeLonge. This really highlights the challenge in sorting credible info from speculation or maybe even disinformation. Critical thinking is essential.
Indeed. Which brings us to our final thought for you, the listener. Considering the evidence we've looked at and all the complexities around UAP, what do you think are the most critical questions we should be asking right now? And what level of transparency is truly necessary, both for national security and for public understanding of this really intriguing phenomenon? We encourage you to think about the diverse viewpoints we've discussed and keep exploring this multifaceted topic on your own.